Boldwood presents The Good Twin, written by Diane Saxon and read by Sophie Dora Hall and Charlotte Worthing. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Thursday, 6th of October, 2016, 5:35 p.m. With a long drag of the last cigarette in the packet, I blow a puff of smoke into the late autumn air, until it plumes in a halo of white to hover around my head. My long black hair, shiny, dyed and straightened to perfection, swings in a heavy curtain just past my shoulder blades. I run my fingers through it, sectioning it so one luscious thick lock falls over my shoulder and lies perfectly across one breast. I take my time admiring it. After all, it was no easy job to get it done. Dad had an absolute tantrum when he saw it. "What the hell have you done? Your hair was perfectly all right before. Why would you do that? Why would you want to change it?" I take another, longer pull of my cigarette and hold the smoke in my lungs until they burn. Of course he doesn't understand. Mum would have, but Mum is no longer here. I turn my mind from that train of thought. I don't want to go there. Today is supposed to be a good day, a hopeful day, which is why I dyed my hair. I love the colour. It's so much nicer than dull as dishwater brown. More than that, it gives me a certain individuality. Right now, I feel the need for that uniqueness. The deep raven is even better in sunlight. There is no sunlight today, though. Typically, it's the dullest day we've had all week. I'm hardly going to get the chance to show off my shiny hair. Still, it's better than it was. LJ had said he liked black hair. It was going to be a surprise for him. With a delicate move, I pincer my thumb and forefinger to pluck the minute speck of tobacco from the tip of my tongue. There's not really anything there, but I once saw some film actress do it in an old film. Retro. It's cool. My freshly stuck-on nails feel unfamiliar, numb, as though I've lost all feeling in the tips of my fingers. I won't be able to paint with them this long, but perhaps I can clip them when I get home. Otherwise, they will simply ping off, leaving me with dried-on glue on my own bitten-down nails. I hold them out in front of my face to admire my long, slender fingers, elongated with those square-tipped, fluorescent pink manicured nails. With a burst of defiance, I'd stuck a matte black one on the ring finger of each hand. I've slid delicate silver rings onto each finger, with one on both thumbs too. They're all different. Sweet. They look good. I look good. I glance at the time and give a little shiver of anticipation. He should be here by now. He will be. Any minute. I'm sure of it. I've really gone to a great deal of effort, and I hope it's appreciated. A thin shudder washes over me as the damp from the miserly drizzle seeps deep into my bones, through the thin jacket I shrugged on as I headed for the door. I sneaked out before Dad arrived home and stopped me. It's not like it's a problem. I just didn't want to stay home, that's all. My little sister, Jade, has after-school club anyway, so there would only have been me there, rattling around in a house which always feels empty these days. I know I could clean the bathrooms or vacuum, but I'm sick of that too. Provided I'm back by the time Dad gets home from work, and I bet he's working late, he'll never even know. I don't want him to know. He wouldn't understand. Overprotective since Mum died, almost 8 months ago now. My breath hitches on a sob, and the quick sting of tears rushes in before I can block them. Pain lances my heart as I tried desperately not to allow it to cripple me. Damn it! I don't want to smudge my carefully applied black eyeliner. It would look like a shitstorm. If Dad had seen me with this much makeup, he'd have a hissy fit. He always has a damned hissy fit these days. The slightest thing sets him off. It's not like I'm not old enough. He's treating me like he does Jade, and she's 6 years younger. He'd not been amused when I dyed my own hair black, and there'd hardly been a mark on the bathroom sink, and only a couple of splashes up the white tiles. He'd gone a little crazy. He's been a little crazy since Mum died. Haven't we all? Be back by 10 p.m, Summer. Don't be late, Summer. You really shouldn't wear makeup to school, Summer. In fact, what do you talk to on social media, Summer? Damn it, Summer. Do you have to splurge your whole life out on Facebook? And it's just too much. You leave yourself so open. Well, school's over and I'm no longer a child. I grip the cigarette between my lips, inhale deep, and pull the zipper up on my jacket. I squint as smoke burns my eyes and tears sting, which is almost welcome. I thought I was all cried out. If LJ doesn't turn up, I won't be cried out. It'll break my bloody heart. As I raise my head, smoke streams from my nostrils, and I watch while it whips away on the cooling air. There's another thing Dad would hit the roof about. Me, smoking. I never did until recently. As far as I know, Skye doesn't. Then again, who knows what effect university life has had on her? I know she drinks a lot and parties now. Good for her. I mean, we all like a drink, and it's not like we're underage. But that's the sum total of my knowledge of her uni life. Maybe she doesn't want us to know how much fun she's having. Not while we're at home. Miserable. I scissor my fingers around the cigarette and take it from my lips so I can grind my teeth against the rolling anger deep in the pit of my stomach that surges up every time I think of her. Leaving me. It's not my fault my identical twin sister Skye decided to go against Dad's advice, to take a year out before starting uni. He'd thought with Mum dying, it would be better if we didn't go to university. We wouldn't be able to make the best of it, with our loss. We'd flounder. If we just stayed at home and deferred our acceptances. I did as he suggested. Skye did not. Who could blame her for wanting to get out of here, for wanting her freedom? Me, that's who. Most girls our age embrace the opportunity to take a year out. I did. I thought it would help us heal if we stuck together as a family. Ride this year out. Turns out that wasn't such a great decision. Not the same decision Skye made either. She wasn't stupid. The reason Dad suggested a year out was not so we could travel the world, taking in the sights and learning how to live independently. It was so we could stay at home, huddled together in a safe cotton wool haven. Stifling. Smothering. A fact I'd not taken long to realise. Skye had said no to the year out. She decided to go direct to university. A fresh start. Skye had made the right choice. There was no doubt. I don't blame her. The only blame alone to cope with all of this. I raise my face to a cloud-laden sky, which is being swallowed by the encroaching night, just as regret threatens to swallow me. I wish I'd been brave. I should have gone too. Away from Dad's choking overprotectiveness, which has only become worse since Skye left. God knows I love him. I really do. But most days I wind up wanting to kill him. And him me. Much as I love him, we're driving each other insane, and that's another reason. If I'd known this would happen, I would quite happily have gone. Left. But how was I to know he'd become a flaming nightmare? Too possessive, too concerned, anxious to know every single thing I do, every place I go. I put it down to the fact that he's lost that tie, not only with Mum dying, but with Skye too. She cut the umbilical cord and flew the nest. We barely hear from her. He can hardly keep tabs on her while she's at university, which means he tightens the reins on me instead, suffocating me with his constant concern. Anxiety. A hard chill invades my bones, and I hunch my shoulders up to my neck to ward it off, clenching my teeth against the rattle of them as an icy finger of wind manages to sneak its way under my collar. Fuck this! A guilty thrill runs through me at saying the word out loud. I never used to drop the F-bomb, keeping it inside my head, but lately it feels good to say it. I flick the cigarette butt. It pirouettes, sending out sparks before it hits the floor, where I grind it beneath my heel into the tarmacked footpath, with grim satisfaction. I glance both ways along the street, puff out of breath. Across my arms over my chest. Great. Just bloody great. I've been stood up. Disappointment grabs at me, but I allow the little stab of anger to take over. LJ's had quite long enough. If he isn't going to show, that's his loss, but he could have at least let me know. It's only polite, and we are a family with good manners. I check the phone for any messages. A million of them on the school leavers of 2016 bloody WhatsApp chat, all of it varying shades of shit. They're all such kids. When will they fucking grow up? You think they were 12-year-olds, not closer to 19, or as though their petty lives have been destroyed because someone's boyfriend dumped them, or their mum wouldn't allow them to borrow the car. Boo bloody who. They are lucky they have their mums. Unlike me and my sisters. I miss my mum every single moment of every single day. I can't breathe without thinking of her. It's so unfair. My mum was the most vital, energetic person I know. She's gone. All the group can do is moan about their mums. I never did that when mine was alive. I wish I had her now. I think I have more to whine about than any of them, but I've distanced myself from them. Can't involve myself in their shit any longer. I swipe my finger across the screen, my false nail scraping over the glass. I scroll down and then up again. Nothing from LJ. The swine. Has something happened to delay him? Has he had to work late? I sigh as I take a look at our family chat. Skye hardly comments on our thread at all. She makes me bloody mad. Too busy to send her little sister a few messages a day. Never mind me, her twin. There's a twinge of sadness that insists on making itself felt beneath the bubbling annoyance. I wish she'd keep in touch more. No matter how angry I am with her, I miss her like crazy. She's due home next week for a quick break, but I doubt she'll bother. She hasn't confirmed it. It seems she's found her niche, her little clique, settling into all the partying and fun, with no mention of any actual work she's supposed to be there for. I know I'm angry with her, but I still feel anxious for her too. Mum would want her to work, to make sure she's keeping up with things. She wouldn't want her to party away her time at university. Embrace it, by all means. That's what Mum would advise her. Us. Both our lives have been sculpted towards success in our separate fields. Both Mum and Dad had gone to university. It had been their ambition for us to go too. When I have the opportunity to next year, I'm going to make sure I always keep in contact with Dad, and more specifically with our younger sister, Jade. After all, we all lost our mum, all three of us. But Jade was probably the one most affected. 11 when it happened, now 12. She needs that motherly figure. Skye could have helped share that burden. Instead, it's not her fault. I'm just being a total bitch. I'm jealous as hell and wish to God I'd made the decision to go with her. But a few months ago, when Mum died, I wasn't ready to leave home. Dad, Jade. It was during those precious few months that we needed to make a decision I wasn't ready to take. So, I deferred until next year. If it was now, my answer would be different. I'd go in a heartbeat. Of the two of us, I'm the worrier. Mum used to say I carried the world for both of us on my shoulders, whereas Skye gained all the confidence. We may look identical in every way, but we're not. Skye is the left-brain thinker. Terrific at mathematics and problem-solving, I am a right-brain thinker. Artistic. Visual. Mum and Dad both knew that. Nurtured our talents and made us feel like individuals. I tug on my bottom lip with my teeth, probably chewing the dark wine lipstick off as I dig my hands deep into the pockets of Skye's favourite jacket, with only a small prod of guilt. What can she expect? If she left it behind, it's obviously no longer her favourite. She hasn't mentioned it, and nor have I mentioned the fact that I've taken to wearing it. I dip my head so I can tuck my face into the collar of her jacket and take comfort from Skye's familiar smell, while tears I've been so determined to ignore trickle down my cheeks. I breathe in deep, then huff out. It wasn't just Jade and Skye and Dad. It was everything. Every bloody thing seems to have gone wrong since the moment Mum died. Little things. I squint at the empty street. I might as well go. If LJ turns up now, I'm going to look like a hooker in any case, with my tear-smudged makeup and bright red nose. I've probably got lipstick stuck to my teeth. He'd hardly be impressed. And first impressions count. Right? 6 weeks we've been chatting online, and this was supposed to be the first time we meet. Only he's stood me up. I've never been stood up before. Not that I've ever gone out with anyone apart from a couple of the spotty-faced boys at school. I haven't got the wrong place. This is definitely it. He said it was the cut-through from his work on his way home. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here like a loser. Loser. That's me. Fucking typical. And now I feel foolish. Can anything else really go wrong with my life? It simply can't get any worse. I like to think so anyway. With a defeated sigh, I push away from where I've been leaning against the brick wall, under a narrow overhang that had provided minimal protection from the drizzle. I peer up and down the deserted road before I head off along Watling Street, towards Wellington Town Centre. The dark car that cruises alongside me is long, with blacked-out windows, and earns itself a momentary disinterested glance as I quicken my step. This is one of the reasons my dad has become overprotective. I'm not being conceited when I say Skye and I attract attention, because we do. Unwanted attention. More often than not when we are together, because of our identical twin status. Often lewd suggestions accompany graphic hand signs from drivers leaning out from open windows of vehicles, with music playing too loud. This sleek car has none of those elements. Any feeling of discomfort fizzles away as I'm more concerned with the sudden closing in of weather to draw the night down faster than I anticipate. I need to get home in case Dad gets there before me. I've been out longer than I thought, hanging around for LJ like some sucker. Just over an hour. I should have cut and run by now, but hope had kept me hanging on. Disappointment etches itself into my soul. I can't believe after all this time, LJ has let me down. It was only supposed to be a brief meet-up, maybe a quick coffee at one of the steamed-up cafes, which are all now shut in any case, just to see if we'd like each other in person. I certainly like his profile pictures. He's just a couple of months older than me, with a beautiful shock of dirty blonde hair swept up in what's meant to look like an effortless peak that falls to one side. The other side of his head is shaved in that sexy, textured crop hairstyle only the most confident of boys are wearing. My heart gives a little squeeze as I allow my mind to wander, and I slow down, hoping he'll lope along the road all apologies and wide smile. LJ isn't a boy, not like the ones I went to sixth form with. His face has the thick stubble of a mature, masculine man, contoured beautifully around a square chin. He's gorgeous. But he's not here. Disappointment claws at me. I thought from our online chats that I was as important to him as he had become to me. Evidently not. I sigh. Right, that's it. No more bloody He's had his chance. I'm done. If I continue to the end of the road, I can nip into Morrison's, pick up a loaf of bread, some milk, and those bloody awful cheap biscuits Dad likes. A healthy biscuit, Dad declares, full of oats which dry the spit in your mouth until it sticks in your throat like lumpy glue. The more you chew, the stickier it becomes. Still, Dad enjoys them. A little too much if you ask me. His waistline has definitely thickened in the last few months, without Mum to control his poor eating habits. I shouldn't buy him biscuits, but he'll be pitifully pleased that I've thought to pick him up a treat, and it will deflect any annoyance that I'm late home and don't have dinner on the off chance he's home before me. I look at my watch. Time has flown. It's creeping up to almost 6:15 p.m, which means by the time I go into Morrison's, grab those things and race home, Dad could well be there before me, making dinner. Dinner. My stomach rebels at the thought. Dad's shit at cooking. He could burn soup. If it wasn't for me whipping up a quick pasta dish or scrambled eggs on toast, we'd live permanently on takeouts. I don't mind an occasional one, but 4 nights a week is too much. Too unhealthy. And I really do prefer healthy food. I don't include oat biscuits in that preference, though. Admittedly, the fact we don't have chocolate biscuits in the house has helped me to keep my own weight down. Jade, I've noticed, has plumped up a little after the initial drastic weight loss when Mum died. She'd needed to gain weight, but if I'm honest, she needs to be careful she doesn't slide too much the other way, if you get my drift. I touch a hand to my own stomach, which up until recently has been concave and is now just tipping over into the convex. I can hardly speak. I don't need to put on any weight either. The bitches, male and female, so-called old school pals, were all too quick to pick up on anything like that, which is another good reason I have little to do with them. I'm more of a lurker on the chat groups, and I can't be asked to go out with them. There's so much talk about being kind to each other, acceptance, tolerance, understanding. It was all a pile of shit the teachers doled out at school, and the kids ignore as they stab you in the back and happily ruin any kind of image you have at the drop of a hat. Since leaving sixth form, instead of becoming kinder, there was a core group who'd honed their skills and escalated their bitch status. One slight head tilt from Kelly Balding, accompanied by the lift of a perfectly microbladed eyebrow. They didn't need to say anything. Their looks spoke volumes. Lips plumped with filler, pouted in that judgmental way. Eyes filled with spiteful humour. Skye and I were the lucky ones. We had each other. They rarely targeted us. We rarely gave them the opportunity. Only Skye was no longer here, and I was on my own. An easy target. I've always been an easy target. They didn't give me any more leeway because Mum had died. No one seemed to care about that anymore. They'd ceased to care about a month after she'd gone, once the funeral was over. We were supposed to have got over it, pulled ourselves together. No one mentioned it, or asked how I felt. Mum dead, Dad a bit useless, Skye self-centred, and Jade really needy. The summer holidays dragged. It brought distance, even from my closest friends, as I argued with my twin. Each of us determined we were right. Nobody wanted to take sides. Turns out, I don't have many friends. Being a twin seems to have brought that, because Skye has always been my best friend, and no one else has ever been that close. No one came between us. Once Mum died, our so-called friends drifted even further. None of it mattered to them. It wasn't their lives, not their catastrophe. How could they understand? According to Facebook, which is the sum total of my contact with ex-school pals apart from WhatsApp, a whole host of them are at university, got jobs. The ones with a little more money have taken a year out to travel the world. Which is how I came to find an online friend. One who understood, who was there whatever the time, day or night. Sweet LJ, who was happy for me to rattle away about what a shit life I have. Messages poured from me, sometimes positive, but more often than not, whiny or bitchy. I couldn't help myself. It was so easy to chat with him online. He never seemed to mind, however much I divulged to him. He's a secret even my twin doesn't know about. I even told him that, and he agreed. He's my secret. She couldn't know, because somehow she would ruin that. Just because she wasn't here for me didn't mean I couldn't have someone else to fill that yawning chasm of emptiness. I need someone other than Skye. I need LJ. Only he isn't here now, when he'd promised to be, and all my growing excitement for this day shrivels and dies, like a dried leaf that crumbles into powder. Disappointment and bitterness take its place. Just another person who thinks nothing of letting me down. For weeks, we've been trying to arrange a meet-up, a time when LJ could take a little while off at the end of the day from his new job as an apprentice engineer. I think my dad would like him. Intelligent, empathetic. That's LJ. Just older than me, he lost his sister some years ago. She must have been older than him. He spoke about it once, but I found it hard to coax much detail out of him after that. He said it was too painful, that she'd taken her own life. Perhaps he'd be more comfortable talking about it face to face. My heart squeezes every time I think about it. How painful it must be to think of someone you love not loving you enough to stick around. So many people call it the easy way out. It can't be easy, knowing you're leaving behind people who love you and whom you love back, even on a bad day. Mum didn't leave deliberately. Her death had been swift, painless, they said, and instant. Although I have my doubts as to how painless it is to have a blood clot explode in your brain. An embolism, they called it. She'd complained of a headache that morning before Skye and I went to school. Dad went to work, dropping Jade off on his way. It was Jade's last year at the junior school. We'd pretty much ignored Mum. She'd complained of a headache for a few days. We'd not even given her a second thought. Who does? Mums aren't there to complain. They're there to complain too. That was another secret I'd shared with LJ. The sneaky guilt that we'd ignored Mum when we could have saved her. If only we'd listened. None of us had. By the time we arrived home at the end of the school day, Jade was already there, upstairs, where Mum had collapsed on the bathroom floor. The paramedics were hovering over Mum, their faces pulled into masks of sympathy. According to the coroner's report, she'd been dead for several hours before Jade came across her. That's life, hey? That's what the thoughtless tell me. The inconsiderate, the superior, the ones who still have their own mothers alive and kicking. My lips twist with cynical bitterness. I've given up on LJ arriving, and quite frankly, unless he has an excuse and a grovelling apology, I'll have nothing further to do with him, the thoughtless prat. I consider blocking him on Facebook, but I'll give him the opportunity to explain first. Maybe. If I ever hear from him again. Maybe he thinks it's a game. I tuck the phone into my pocket and squint into the dusky light as I look right and then left, ready to dash across the deserted street to the far side that will take me from the quiet row of mainly empty old houses where most people are probably still at work. A gust of wind whips up and hurtles wet leaves and twigs in a whirl towards me, in an advance warning of the weather front setting in. I duck my head and stride towards a more commercial area, lit by huge orange sodium lights from the supermarket car park, their warmth pulling me in their direction. I frown, thinking it would have been far more logical to have arranged to meet LJ somewhere like Morrison's, but I'd agreed to his suggestion without thought. I trust him. After all, we've got to know each other. The same black car lingers further along at the curbside, now on the same side of the road as me, engine gently idling, headlights off, probably waiting for someone to knock off work and walk through that same passageway. I hesitate for a split second, not really bothered by the presence of the vehicle, just a fleeting sense of unease at the quietness. The street is more often than not deserted. It's not the most salubrious part of town, and the black BMW is probably not the normal class of car that cruises along here. I shrug off the feeling, all the more reason not to be worried. I step out onto the tarmac road. The car's engine revs, headlights blaze, and instead of creeping towards me, it shoots forward, a quick kangaroo hop, then a roar. My heart crashes against my ribcage as I raise my arms in an automatic defense, but the car jolts to a halt right in front of me, the bumper barely kissing the side of my knee. Fury courses through me at the sheer stupidity of the person behind the wheel. Who the hell do they think they are? Vin Diesel? Without thought, I smack one open hand on the bonnet of the car and the other on my chest, gasping for breath as I glare at the person behind the windscreen. What an arsehole. The car door flies open and someone steps out, a mere shadow as my vision is filled with tears of fright and the bright glaring beam from the headlights, which spark out in all directions. You moron! The tears I've staved off for the past few weeks prick the back of my eyes for the second time this evening, and a senseless, terrified rage takes over, my voice breaking on every word. You absolute fucking... I barely see the silhouetted person as they stride around the open car door, fast and furious, before a fist plows into my face. My head snaps back, and the burning shock of that punch throbs through my entire system as I try desperately to draw in a breath, through blood, mucus. I raise a shaking hand to my face, no longer the aggressor, but the victim, and shock holds me in its thrall so I can't move, can't run, can't scream. When the second punch comes, my knees crumple beneath me. I stagger back a pace before I sag to the ground in front of wide car tyres, where wet leaves have circled around to bunch up in the gutter. A laboured sob breaks from me, my voice cracking as I cover my face with both hands and roll my head downward into my knees, into a tight ball, a protective ball. Don't! Please, don't! I hate to beg, but there is nothing I wouldn't do to make this pain stop. The words bubble through the gush of blood coating my fingers, which drips into the lap of my jeans. Cold, oily mud soaks through the material at my knees, and I quake as another gust of wind rushes through, snatching cruelly at my life. Why me? What have I done to deserve this? I raise my head to appeal to my assailant, and a surge of blood fills my mouth, so whatever words spill out are accompanied by crimson bubbles spilling down my chin, to run down the jacket I took from my twin. Stole from her wardrobe. She's never going to forgive me for getting it so blooded. That's if she ever sees it again. Ever sees me again. Skye. Summer! Her panicked voice screams inside my head. She'll know. We always know. My pain will be her pain. I look up, and the glaring lights fill my vision. The shadow towers over me, and before I can plead for mercy, the sole of a boot stamps into my face. My head snaps back. "Skye, help me!" A heavy cloak pulls over me, and I'm not sure if that is something physical my attacker has done, or whether my mind has shut down to protect me from further damage. Darkness rises to engulf me, until there is nothing. Not even sound.
Chapter 2. Saturday the 20th of May, 2023, 11:30 a.m. 2 hours before the wedding. Skye nudged her dad's fumbling fingers aside and took hold of the two ends of his bow tie. "Why didn't you buy a ready-tied one?" "I already had this one in the drawer." Her own fingers fumbled. "What?" She gave the ends a quick yank and jerked her dad's head towards her. "You're not using an old bow tie, Dad. You can't. It's your wedding day." An unperturbed smile lingered on his lips. "It's only been used once. But something old, something new." She blinked up into his eyes. "Please don't tell me this is from when you married Mum." He held still, then a smile spread over his face as his eyes twinkled with amusement. "All right. I won't then." A snort of disbelieving laughter burst from her, and she stepped back. Skye dropped one end of the tie, and ignoring yet another pleading message lighting up the screen from her recent ex, hit the play button on the phone she'd balanced on the edge of the bedstead. Determined not to let Jordan ruin the day for any of them, she studied the YouTube video and deftly tied the bow tie around her dad's pristine, stiff white collar. At least that was brand new. The suit was hired, so technically his something borrowed. There. She stepped back to admire her workmanship and tilted her head. "A little crooked, I think," she grimaced. An understatement, as the bow settled in a 20-2 position. Skye reached out and tugged the bow tie undone. Retying it, she smiled. "That's better." She patted her dad's chest and left her hand there, just above his frantically beating heart. "Nervous?" He placed a clammy hand on her cool one and gave it a squeeze. "Terrified." "You know you're doing the right thing." "I know." He lifted her hand from his chest and placed a kiss in her palm. His voice thickened. "You're so much like your mum. You know, I will always love her. No matter what." "I know that, Dad. But she's been gone over 7 years now. You can't be expected to live your life alone." "You tell that to Jade." "Jade might understand when she grows up a bit." "She's 19. Skye shook her head. "It doesn't mean to say she's mature." Less forgiving than her dad, she stepped back and dropped her hand from his. Sadness oozed from him, but Skye ignored it. If her little madam of a sister didn't turn up today, she'd never forgive her. They'd both lost their mum. They'd both lost their sister. It might be 7 years ago, but it still hurt. After all, how could you get over that? All three of them dealt with it in entirely different ways. Skye chose to tuck it away. For now. Just as she'd decided to lock away her fury at her ex too. She'd switched off the notification sound on her phone, but it didn't stop the messages from streaming over the screen. She could turn it off, but what if Jade needed her? She could block him, but... Determined not to dwell on it today of all days, her dad's wedding day, Skye snatched up both glasses of Prosecco she'd brought into his bedroom and, forcing a smile, handed one to her dad. "Here. Cheers." He looked at the glass. A rueful smile quirked his lips. "I'd have preferred a whiskey." He clinked his glass to hers and took a long pull of the drink, wrinkling his nose with distaste as he swallowed it like it was lemonade. She guessed not everyone was a fan of Prosecco. Skye squeezed his arm. "Take it easy, Dad. We don't want you drunk before you take your vows." He smiled back, placed his glass down, picked up his jacket, and shrugged into it. As he turned, he studied himself in the full-length mirror. "Not bad, for an old geezer." Skye laughed. "Old? You're only 52. It's taken you long enough." She picked up the buttonhole that had been laid on the dressing table, positioned it on his jacket lapel, then threaded through a pearl-headed pin to secure it in place. She smoothed the material with her hand and grinned at him. At 5 feet 10 inches, she still had to look up at him, but once she had her heels on, she'd be about eye level with the 6'1" he claimed to be. "Martha's going to be swept off her feet, you handsome devil." Her dad's rare laughter filled the room. "Aha, we're ready, I see." Skye whirled in the direction of the door, where Jacob, her dad's best man, loitered. A little younger than her dad, a tall, slender man, sandy hair shot through with streaks of grey, pale grey eyes twinkling with warmth. She sent him a cheeky grin and spread her arms wide before she pirouetted to show off the ripped jeans and baggy grey t-shirt she currently wore. "What do you think, Jacob?" Jacob pushed away from the doorframe and stepped into her dad's bedroom. He was dressed impeccably. "I think it's great to see what an effort you've made." Skye swiped up her drink and made for the door, giving him a shoulder bump on the way. "Cheeky beggar. It won't take me more than 10 minutes to slip into my bridesmaid's dress." The one she'd had the honour of picking herself, as Martha had claimed to have no idea about young women's fashion, despite the fact she was only in her late 40s and always looked impeccable. Classic, maybe, rather than modern. Skye had gone for a cerulean sleeveless empire-line full-length dress to complement her chestnut hair and make the blue in her eyes zing. Her eye colour was the reason her parents had named her Skye. According to her dad, when they were born, her twins' eyes and hers had been such an intense blue that they changed their names from the dual names, Topaz and Jade, the moment he remarked they were like a summer sky. Summer and Skye. Only now, it was just Skye. Her chest gave a light squeeze at the painful reminder, always hovering on the edge of her conscience, which was as much as she could allow today. This was a happy day. A good day. The best thing that had happened to them as a family for the past 7 years. She wasn't about to dwell on history, on bad things. She took a small sip of Prosecco and held it in her mouth while she stared at the closed door at the end of the hallway. She could have got changed at her own place, just a 20-minute drive away, but she wanted some special time with her dad before the wedding. Just the two of them. A quiver of anticipation trickled through her, like the bubbles down her throat. She was ready for this. This was what they all needed. To move on. To live again. Here was their chance. Martha was a breath of fresh air. Skye took a long breath in. There was plenty of time. As she'd told Jacob, she only needed to pull on her dress and slip into her heels, and she was ready. She'd applied her makeup before checking on her dad. A fortuitous moment that turned out to be, as he'd needed her help. The touch of foundation she'd applied dimmed the smattering of bright freckles scattered over the bridge of her nose, spilling onto her cheeks, to give the illusion of the smooth alabaster skin she would rather have had. The light dusting of bronzer warmed her pale skin, together blending into the oyster she'd brushed up to high, arched eyebrows she'd defined with a subtle swipe of brown powder. Skye suspected Martha had allowed her the freedom of colour choice for the dresses to get her on side. The truth was, it wasn't needed. She'd been on Martha's side from the moment she'd met her. The woman had brought a new lease of life to Skye's dad, a life that had dulled after the death of her mum and extinguished after the disappearance of Summer, her twin sister. Skye pushed open the door to what was now the guest bedroom. She no longer had a room of her own since Martha moved in and made changes that had been desperately needed. It didn't matter. Skye had a place of her own, always had, since she'd left university with a first-class honours degree in mathematics and finance. She could have chosen to stay in Lincoln. She could have moved to London. She'd wanted to be closer to her dad and little sister at the time. Not so close it brought back constant memories. The commute by train from Wellington to Birmingham, where she worked, was hellish, but she didn't want to live in the city. She wasn't a city girl, but for the field of meteorology she'd selected, she had no other choice but to commute. She stared at her old room. After the wedding, her dad and Martha were talking about selling both houses. Martha claimed she didn't need to live with ghosts, because despite changing things around, they still haunted Skye's dad. Skye didn't necessarily agree those ghosts would be left behind once they moved. Summer's disappearance had left a gaping wound that would forever ooze. The torture of not knowing what had become of her twin. But she understood Martha's viewpoint. It appeared both Martha's son, Luke, 3 years younger than Skye, and Skye's younger sister, Jade, had differing opinions on that philosophy. Which was one of the reasons Jade had elected not to attend the wedding at the last minute, despite helping to choose the bridesmaids' outfits only the two of them would wear. Whatever it was that had prompted Jade's outburst 2 days earlier had sent her running for cover, or, more precisely, back to university. Skye suspected it had something to do with Martha sending Summer's old clothes and toys to the charity shop, despite the fact that they probably wouldn't accept the balding, one-eyed Care Bear she'd dug from the bottom of Summer's wardrobe. Appeared to have upset Jade. She was the one guilty of removing that Care Bear's eye when she was a baby. It had been a standing joke, one Martha could not have been expected to understand. Then there had been the boxing up of all the girls' precious belongings, from school reports through to dressing-up clothes and photographs that their dad had found too hard to face. The insult had stung. Not so much Skye as Jade. So, Jade had gone. Reluctant to tell Martha that she may be one bridesmaid down, Skye and her dad had kept the outburst between them, or at least that's what Skye had believed. But there was something in Martha's intelligent gaze that made Skye wonder just how much she knew. The secrets she and her dad had kept in the past were now shared as he took Martha into their circle. It was good for him. She was good for him. Shame Jade and Luke thought otherwise. Skye didn't know what Luke's problem was, but Jade was twitchy that Martha was a money-grabbing gold digger, and all she wanted was to get married, get the will changed, and steal their inheritance. It was laughable. Personally, Skye thought it was an insult to their dad. He was handsome, in good nick for his age, and a lovely, if slightly sad, personality. There was no reason he shouldn't be attracted to the opposite sex. He needed this. He needed Martha. She brought a warmth and a vitality to him Skye had no memory of. Skye wasn't entirely sure what Luke's issue was with her dad. She didn't know him well enough, but considering his age, he acted like a spoilt teenager around them. Petulant and gruff, he dug his hands deep into his pockets and rounded his shoulders as he cast them wary looks from under a long, floppy blonde fringe. Maybe his anger and distrust were because his girlfriend had broken up with him. Or maybe his girlfriend had broken up with him because of his attitude. Whichever order the breakup came in, Skye had no desire to be in his company any longer than she needed to be. She had her own breakup to deal with. Jordan, her ex-boyfriend, who'd been invited to the wedding, until Skye had caught him sexting a woman on the other side of the world. Oklahoma or Alabama, one of those states that had a rousing song with the name in the title. 8 months they'd been seeing each other. She actually they'd even been talking about moving in together. When she discovered his deception, she also realised he wasn't really the man for her. She wasn't that bothered by their split. He was. He'd turned up on her doorstep, a little worse for wear, and begged her forgiveness on more than one occasion. She forgave him. She simply didn't want him back. Any affection she'd held for him had been wiped out in one little indiscretion. An indiscretion which, had she loved him, she might have been able to forgive. But she didn't love him. She never had. Skye had started to believe she was incapable of love. True love. She loved her dad, and she loved her younger sister. That being said, she often felt a strong inclination to murder Jade. Apart from those two, there was no one in her life she'd allow under her skin. Even Auntie Judith, her mum's sister, was kept at arm's length, just in case Skye became too fond. Too close. Because then the inevitable happened and they would disappear, one way or another, and they'd be gone from her life, leaving her to straggle back the loose ends of her very ragged life once more. Despite promising herself not to look, Skye sank down onto the bed and checked the messages from Jordan, the man she'd thought she would marry one day. She closed her eyes against the pain. Jesus. He'd sent reams of them. She scrolled through, not bothering to read them all in detail, but she got the general gist. Skye, losing you is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. Well, he should have thought of that before turning to another woman for comfort. Please, don't leave me. She hadn't. He'd technically left her. He may not have had a physical relationship with the other woman, but somehow this was worse. It was a desertion of her mentally and emotionally. I can't stop thinking about you and how we could so easily fix this. No, we can't, she thought, because Skye didn't want to fix something that was broken so badly. She wasn't sure she cared enough about Jordan to fix it. Right now, she was still angry, but a thin layer of, I don't give a shit, coated her feelings. She didn't care. All she felt was intense, not after she'd read the text he accidentally sent to her instead of the woman on the other side of the world. A text confessing how awful Skye was, how she made his life intolerable, and he couldn't wait to leave her. According to his text, he'd booked a flight from London Heathrow to OKC, with a stopover at JFK in 3 weeks' time. She was never quite sure how he'd expected to explain that journey to her. She'd looked it up. The flight alone could take him anything between 12 and 17 hours. Skye had no way of checking the truth of his texts, but she had no reason to doubt it either. The man was a lying shit. She swallowed any fragment of emotion. Skye had imagined this would be her dream. What her dad was doing. A wedding day. A ring on her finger. Relief and fury still battled together. Relief that she'd found out in time, before she'd committed herself heart and soul to Jordan. Fury that he thought he could so easily make it better. There was no better. The final message in the string garnered the first response from her. "I'll be there for you at the wedding. We can talk." What? No. Skye surged to her feet. White noise filled her head. How could he even think that he might still be welcome at her dad's wedding? There was nothing about their situation that made any of it all right. He couldn't mean it. Was he just trying to get a response from her? She sank back down onto the bed again, wildly tapping at the phone. Do not even think about turning up at my dad's wedding. Not even by the longest stretch of imagination could you think you would be welcome. You are not. Stay away. Skye hit send and snatched up her drink, taking a large gulp and instantly regretting it, as the bubbles fizzed up the back of her nose, while she watched the cursor flashing madly as Jordan typed an answer. No need to shout. I have no intention of coming. I just wanted you to stop ignoring me. Skye placed her empty glass back on the dresser and covered her face with her hands, relief flooding through her. Her phone burred to signal another incoming message. I love you. I miss you. Please, can we talk? FFS. What do you not understand about I don't ever want to see you again? Stay away from me. No, not today, not tomorrow, not when I have space to think. Never. Leave. She slapped the phone face down on the bed and jumped to her feet again. She poured herself another glass of bubbly and this time sipped it slowly. If she'd had an inkling of affection still left for Jordan, he'd wiped it out. Did he really imagine he would still be invited to the wedding? Skye scrolled back in her mind through the brief conversations they'd had after she'd caught him out. She never actually said he was uninvited. But really? How thick-skinned was he? He was supposed to have sat next to her on the top table. Sadly, now she had been partnered with Luke for the walk down the church aisle, followed by having to endure being seated next to him for the entire duration of the wedding breakfast. As if it wasn't bad enough that she'd broken up with her boyfriend and Luke had broken up with his girlfriend, now it looked like they were being paired. Why Martha and her dad couldn't have got married in a registry office was also beyond Skye. Personally, she'd have rather been barefoot on a faraway shore, with the sea lapping at her toes. Each to their own. Only now it meant she was stuck next to misery guts for the whole of the meal, without even her sister around as a distraction. Jade should have been on the other side of Luke, in which case at least Skye could have leaned over him to chat to her, rude or not. Maybe if Jade turned up, Skye could jiggle the places around, so she sat next to Jacob instead. Skye dug into the holdall she'd placed on the new sofa bed that had replaced her double bed. The bright whites and yellows of the bedding had filled the room before, and despite her agreement about making changes, she couldn't stifle the quiet shunt of melancholy. Instead of the bright splash of light, the room had been dimmed with ochres and rusts. Certainly not Skye's taste. But it was no longer her home. She no longer had a say. Thank God Martha had allowed her the choice of her own bridesmaid's dress. Otherwise, they could have had a disaster on their hands. She wasn't averse to colours, but she really hadn't cared for the Barbie pink Martha had suggested. She laid out the underwear she'd bought especially for the occasion. Not her normal pretty floral bra and knickers layered with lace and flowers, but smooth, big knickers and matching bra in flesh colour. Not that she knew anyone with flesh the colour of her underwear. If she did, they'd already be classified as dead. It was practical. The shape and the halter neck sneaked neatly under the halter strap of the dress. Skye stripped and laid her clothes on the sofa bed, ready to roll up and stash in her holdall. She whipped off her bra and edged her knickers down her thighs, letting them drop to the floor at her feet. The familiar crack sound of her bedroom door opening had her slapping her arm across her breasts and instantly dipping into a crouch. Heart hammering, she twisted her head in the direction of the intruder. Pale green eyes glittered at her as a wide smile spread across the interloper's face. Well, there's a sight you don't see every day. Chapter 3. Thursday the 6th of October, 2016, 11:55 p.m. With his face cupped in hands that refused to stop shaking, LJ groaned. A low groan. A powerful groan. A mixture of elation and horror. He'd done it. Against all odds, he'd actually pulled off the impossible. It hadn't been difficult to entice her in. The good twin. Little Miss Goody Two-Shoes. She'd been all too malleable, so willing to pour her heart out. Poor little abandoned Summer, with no one to love and no one who loved her. He'd reeled her in so easily, because she'd been willing to be seduced. That part had been easy. The problem had arisen when he realised the moment she saw him she'd bolt. He'd thought to wait it out, let the disappointment of being stood up wither her. He'd misjudged that part of the plan. Her withering had been momentary. Then she'd rallied. The first bit had gone beautifully smoothly. He wasn't anything like the profile he'd stolen of a boy only months older than Summer. Her ideal man, so to speak. LJ had got that information by trolling her, or stalking her, if that was a better term. He'd followed her around Facebook, joined the groups she joined, made friends with those whom she friended, before he even approached her, offering to be her friend. Just to build that profile. It didn't take much. A few months. In fact, it was dead easy. It hardly took a bright mind. But he could do crafty. He was proud of his deviousness. It had held him in good stead for years, and now everything was pulling together. Initially, it hadn't been her intention to look for romance. Summer had wanted a friend. Someone not close enough so they'd gossip with real-life friends. She wanted to be able to offload. So he trawled her posts and messages and made himself as close a lookalike as possible to Ansel Elgort, who she seemed to swoon over every time his name was brought up in conversation. No one noticed when he swapped out his profile picture for a blonde. Nobody was interested in his life. They were all too concerned with their own. He'd not made himself too easily available. She'd come to him. He'd given little hints about how hard his parents were on him. Going to university was never on his programme. She was lucky to even be able to consider it. He'd had to work from the age of 15. Now his parents were talking about the best time for leaving home. The sob story wasn't enough to make her back off, just sufficient to give her empathy. So when he returned it, it was genuine. Or as genuine as an imposter could be. He lowered his hands and dropped them to the kitchen table. He clenched his jaw, determined to override that weakness that had them still trembling. Panic had been the problem. He knew he'd panicked. If he had the chance to do it all again, he'd do it differently. Finesse that end bit, the bit he totally fucked up. He'd gone in too blasé, too confident, sure that he knew what he was doing. He didn't. He made a complete balls up of the whole thing. He rubbed his grazed knuckles. For a start, he should have worn leather gloves. Also, he probably wouldn't have chosen to injure her in that way. Now, he was going to have to wait until she was at best healed, at least lucid. Hissing out as he dabbed anaesthetic onto his knuckles, LJ let his mind wander free. Who needed lucid? Who needed healed? The chair scraped back, almost upending as he came to his feet. Healing was something he needed to do. Before he could train her, he needed to break her. From that, she could pay for the sins of her father.
Chapter 4. Thursday, 6th of October, 2016, 11:55 p.m. Sound is the first thing I'm aware of. At least, the lack of it. Pain spears my face with an excruciating pulse that radiates through my entire head, so the power to think eludes me. Barely able to breathe, I raise a hand up to touch a fat, swollen nose that doesn't even feel like my own. A painful wince comes out as I graze shaking fingers across crusted-on blood and mucus, which blocks my nostrils, sending a spike of panic through me. I open my mouth and drink in stale air, as I try to blink away the darkness that presses down on me. Scary and dense. Fear tightens my throat. Where the hell am I? I struggle to sit up, reaching out with tentative hands to feel along the length of what may be some kind of camping bed. A cold metal frame supporting a thin mattress. Enveloped in shadows, with only a chink of light in a thin oblong line, I presume is the outline of a door. A door I pray to be able to escape through, but I can't move. Terror has rooted me to the spot in case my attacker returns. Opens it. Comes through. Scared enough to not even risk putting my stockinged feet on the floor, I tuck them up onto the mattress to sit cross-legged. After all, I have no idea what I would be putting my feet onto. My toes curl up tight as painful cramp takes hold of them. Where are my shoes? Why take my shoes? Confusion slushes through a mind full of blank holes. If you take my shoes, I can't kick. I can't run. I raise my fingers to my nose again, to carry out a tentative exploration. With the tip of my fingernail, I gently scrape away the thick slabs that plugs my nostrils until a thin inlet of air seeps through one side and then the next. I blink. It's pitch black, and even though my eyes should have become accustomed to the dark in the last few minutes while I've been sitting here, it's too dense, too frickin' scary. I'm petrified. Panic is a bird's wing fluttering in the cavity of my chest where my heart used to be. What am I doing here? Why me?